Lady Vaelara Sorin had never imagined that poverty could arrive wearing the face of an accountant, but the thin gray official standing in her private observatory looked remarkably close. Behind him, the violet clouds of Mareth drifted beneath the glass floor, split by glowing transport lanes and the slow shadows of cargo vessels descending toward the capital. "Your security allowance has been suspended," he said for the third time, as though repetition might make the sentence less offensive. Vaelara's long ears angled backward beneath her silver hair, a gesture every servant in House Sorin recognized as the final warning before something expensive was thrown. "Suspended?" she repeated. "I am traveling to a diplomatic summit where 3 noble houses have publicly promised to poison me." The accountant consulted his tablet. "4, my lady. House Karun added a formal threat this morning." Vaelara stared at him. How thoughtful of them to file the paperwork. 2 hours later, she stood inside the employment gallery of the Eastern Orbital Port, surrounded by holographic advertisements for elite protectors. Towering reptilian mercenaries displayed lists of conquered moons. Cybernetic monks promised to detect murder through changes in air pressure. One insectoid warrior claimed to have 900 eyes, although Vaelara privately suspected half of them were decorative. All of them charged enough credits to purchase a small asteroid. At the very bottom of the registry, beneath a malfunctioning advertisement for kitchen drones, she found Adrian Cross. Human. Male. 47 standard years. Former military service. No noble certifications. No ceremonial training. No known family. His fee was so low Vaelara assumed the terminal had omitted a digit. It had not. Adrian waited beside a vending machine, wearing a plain dark coat and carrying one travel bag. He looked disappointingly ordinary. No glowing implants, no plasma scars, no ceremonial blades hanging from his belt. His brown hair was touched with gray, his face calm and unreadable, his posture almost lazy. Vaelara approached him with the same expression she used when inspecting damaged furniture. "You are the human?" "On most days," Adrian replied. She paused. "And on the others?" "I avoid mirrors." Her ears twitched despite herself. "Your file says you served in the military." "The military says many things." "Did you win any medals?" "A few." "Why are they not listed?" "They were ugly." Vaelara narrowed her pale golden eyes. "You understand that I require protection, not entertainment." "That is fortunate. I am much worse at entertainment." She nearly dismissed him then, but the accountant's message still glowed on her wrist display, reminding her that her budget was now smaller than the maintenance cost of her perfume cabinet. "You will address me as Lady Vaelara. You will remain 3 steps behind me. You will not speak during diplomatic meetings unless I command it, and you will not embarrass me in front of the imperial court." Adrian lifted his bag. "That last condition may require additional payment." She hired him anyway. Their first walk through the orbital port was enough to confirm her opinion that she had made a terrible mistake. Adrian showed no interest in the armed guards, the scanning drones, or the black uniformed customs officers watching them from the upper balconies. Instead, he stopped to examine a vendor selling fried luminescent worms. "Do not eat those," Vaelara warned. "Why?" "They are still alive." Adrian watched one crawl off a plate. "Fresh, then." "Humans are disgusting. We prefer adaptable." Yet beneath his careless remarks, something about him unsettled her. He never looked directly at the security cameras, but he always moved outside their blind angles. He shifted positions before crowds became dense. When a service drone dropped a metal container behind them, Adrian's hand moved beneath his coat before the sound reached Vaelara's ears. The motion was so quick she wondered whether she had imagined it. At Dock 7, her personal shuttle waited beneath a curtain of blue fuel mist. 2 port officers stood near the boarding ramp. Their uniforms were correct, their insignias flawless, their faces pleasantly blank. Adrian stopped. "Why are we waiting?" Vaelara asked. "Those men are not port officers." "They are wearing port uniforms." "Yes, That is usually how disguises work. One of the officers smiled and stepped forward. Adrian moved slightly in front of her, still holding his travel bag. He looked neither frightened nor aggressive. He merely seemed tired, as if the situation had interrupted a quiet afternoon. "Gentlemen," he said, "before we begin, I should mention that my employer is in a bad mood and I have not eaten." Vaelara stared at him. "That is your warning? I am cheap. The warnings are also cheap." The false officers exchanged a glance. Adrian noticed. His expression did not change, but something in the air seemed to tighten around him. For the first time, Vaelara wondered whether the registry had truly omitted a digit, or perhaps an entire history. The false port officers moved at the same instant. One reached inside his uniform while the other stepped toward Vaelara, with the pleasant smile of a man about to make a regrettable professional decision. Adrian dropped his travel bag. It struck the floor with a dull metallic weight, heavier than Vaelara expected, and before either attacker could draw a weapon, he kicked the bag forward. It slid beneath the first man's feet, upsetting his balance. Adrian caught his wrist, turned once, and redirected the half-drawn pulse pistol into the second officer's chest. The weapon discharged with a bright crack. Blue energy struck the man's protective field, sending him into the boarding ramp hard enough to dent the alloy. The first attacker opened his mouth, perhaps to shout, perhaps to complain, but Adrian pressed 2 fingers against a nerve cluster beneath his jaw. The man collapsed without completing either task. Vaelara stared at both bodies. "You killed them." "No. They are not moving. That is often the first symptom of being unconscious." The second man groaned from beneath the ramp. Adrian glanced at him. "See? Very reassuring." Port security alarms began howling overhead. Red light swept across the dock as armored drones descended from ceiling compartments. Vaelara expected Adrian to raise his hands. Instead, he retrieved his bag, brushed dust from one corner, and walked toward her shuttle. "Should we not explain what happened?" "We could," he said, "but the men wearing stolen uniforms have friends watching the cameras." "You know that how?" "The cameras turned toward you before they attacked." Vaelara looked up. Every security lens above Dock 7 was pointed directly at her. Adrian boarded the shuttle without waiting for permission. She followed, annoyed by his confidence and more annoyed that it seemed justified. The moment the hatch sealed, the vessel's artificial intelligence requested clearance. Adrian entered a sequence into the navigation console with unsettling familiarity. Vaelara folded her arms. "That is my private access system." "It was." "What did you do?" "Improved it." The shuttle launched before port control could lock the dock. It shot through a curtain of fuel mist, passed between 2 cargo carriers, and entered the orbital traffic stream beneath Marath's violet atmosphere. Behind them, security craft began pursuit. Vaelara leaned over the console. "You have caused an international incident." "Not yet. 3 patrol ships are chasing us. That makes it local." He guided the shuttle into the shadow of a massive living freighter, a transparent star creature called an Orus, bred to carry cargo inside its mineralized organs. Its luminous body pulsed around them like a floating cathedral of blue veins. Adrian cut the engines and allowed the shuttle to drift beneath one of the creature's fins. The patrol vessels rushed past without detecting them. Vaelara watched the scanners clear. "You have done this before." "I have hidden beneath larger animals, yes." "In space?" "Not always." She studied him in silence. He sat with one hand resting loosely near the controls, completely calm while an Orus the size of a city moved above them. An ordinary bodyguard would have been sweating. Adrian merely examined a small scratch on the console and looked disappointed by the workmanship. Their journey continued through the Helion Passage, where star lanes curved between gravity towers and ancient navigation beacons older than Vaelara's civilization. Merchant vessels flashed identification codes in 100 languages. Solar farms unfolded like silver flowers near the sun. Farther out, a procession of pilgrims traveled inside spherical ships filled with artificial forests. Adrian watched everything without wonder. "You are remarkably difficult to impress," Vaelara said. "I once saw a moon explode during breakfast." She turned toward him. "What?" "The coffee survived. That was the impressive part." At the military archive station orbiting Delphar, they were forced to stop for inspection. The station resembled a black spear driven through a ring of white light, its surfaces covered in defensive cannons and encrypted signal arrays. Vaelara's diplomatic credentials granted them temporary entry, though every soldier they passed seemed more interested in Adrian than in her. One gray-haired officer froze when he saw him. His hand rose halfway toward a salute before he quickly pretended to adjust his collar. Vaelara noticed. Adrian noticed her noticing. "Old friend?" she asked. "Bad collar." Inside the archive chamber, a bureaucratic intelligence scanned Vaelara's identity and mistakenly assigned her unrestricted historical access. A cheerful holographic face appeared above the terminal. "Welcome, Supreme Strategic Auditor." Vaelara blinked. "I am not a strategic auditor." "Correction accepted, Supreme Strategic Auditor." Adrian stepped closer. "We should leave." That alone made her stay. She entered his name. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the chamber doors locked. The lights dimmed. Layer after layer of classified seals appeared across the screen, each bearing warnings reserved for extinct weapons, forbidden commanders, and wars officially denied by the Empire. A single file opened. Command Authority. Cross, Adrian. Confirmed campaigns, 23. Outcome, 23 victories. Vaelara stopped breathing. Beneath the record appeared the names of civilizations she had studied as a child, armies described as unconquerable, empires that had vanished without explanation, fleets whose defeat had been credited to natural disasters or internal collapse. The screen flickered. One final line appeared. Subject identity erased by unanimous imperial order. Then every file vanished. The holographic face smiled brightly. No records found. Vaelara slowly turned toward Adrian. He looked at the blank terminal, then at her. "This," he said, "is why I usually avoid libraries." Vaelara did not speak until the archive chamber released its locks. Even then, she merely walked beside Adrian through the station corridors with her long ears held rigid and her expression carved into the cold dignity expected of a noblewoman. Inside, however, her thoughts collided like ships in a damaged docking ring. 23 campaigns. 23 victories. Civilizations declared unbeatable. Records erased by unanimous imperial order. She had hired him because his fee was lower than the price of one ceremonial necklace. The universe, she decided, possessed a cruel sense of humor. Adrian carried his travel bag as though nothing unusual had happened. "You lied to me," she said. "I answered every question you asked. You said you had won a few medals. I did. You commanded 23 wars. That was not the question." Vaelara stopped beneath a row of floating memorial lights. Each light represented a destroyed fleet, and together they formed a glowing river along the ceiling. Were those records real? Adrian examined one of the lights. "Archives are unreliable. The station sealed itself when I entered your name. It may be shy. Military computers are not shy. This one erased everything and pretended nothing happened. That sounds shy to me." She wanted to shake him. Unfortunately, he looked like the sort of man who would remain calm while being shaken and then ask whether she had finished. Instead, she lowered her voice. "Why would entire empires erase the identity of the commander who saved them?" Adrian's face changed so slightly that another person might have missed it. His humor remained, but something older settled behind his eyes. "Because saving people does not always make them grateful." Before she could press further, a squad of station soldiers rounded the corridor. Their armor bore the silver crest of Delphar Command. The officer at their front was old, broad-shouldered, and decorated with enough metals to require structural support. He saw Vaelara first, then Adrian. The officer stopped breathing. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then his hand rose sharply to his chest in an ancient military salute no longer used by any modern fleet. "Commander," he whispered. Adrian gave him a tired look. "You have mistaken me for someone better dressed." The officer lowered his hand at once. Fear replaced recognition. "Of course. My apologies." The soldiers passed, but several glanced back. Vaelara waited until they disappeared beyond the next security gate. "Bad collar?" she asked. "Very bad collar." They returned to the shuttle under armed escort. Officially, the escort was provided for Vaelara's protection. Unofficially, every soldier kept a careful distance from Adrian, as if standing too near him might awaken an old war. Once aboard, Vaelara opened her private intelligence network. She searched his name through noble registries, mercenary databases, military archives, criminal records, and historical libraries. Every result contradicted the others. Adrian Cross had died 19 years earlier on a mining moon. Adrian Cross had never served in the military. Adrian Cross had been born on 6 different planets. One record claimed he was a 73-year-old agricultural engineer specializing in hostile vegetables. Vaelara turned the display toward him. Hostile vegetables. Adrian studied the file. "I had a difficult period." The deeper she searched, the stranger it became. References vanished while she read them. Names of retired admirals became restricted. Entire planetary archives disconnected the moment she requested campaign records. On the 7th attempt, her console displayed a single warning: "Do not continue." A second message appeared beneath it: "They will notice." The shuttle lights flickered. Adrian stood immediately. "What happened?" Vaelara asked. "We have been noticed." A faint chime came from the navigation system. 9 vessels had appeared behind them without broadcasting identification. Their hulls were coated in light-bending material, visible only when they crossed distant stars. Different designs, different species, different military origins. Yet they moved with perfect coordination. Vaelara stared at the tactical display. Those ships belong to rival civilizations. Yes. They have been at war with one another for 80 years. Apparently they found a hobby. A transmission arrived. The image was distorted, but the voice was clear. "Deliver the human and the noblewoman will be permitted to continue." Vaelara looked at Adrian. "They are offering to spare me." "How generous." "Do you recognize them?" "No. You answered too quickly." Adrian walked to the weapons console and studied the surrounding ships. "I recognize their tactics." Vaelara's irritation faded. "From which war?" "Several." The enemy vessels spread around them, cutting off every escape lane. Their weapons charged, casting red reflections across the shuttle windows. Adrian remained calm, but his hand rested near the controls with the precision she had seen at Dock 7. "Can this ship fight?" he asked. "It is a diplomatic shuttle." "So no. It has defensive weapons. Decorative weapons. They are Imperial standard." "That is what I said." Vaelara moved beside him. "You are my bodyguard. I expect you to protect me." Adrian glanced at her, and for the first time she saw no trace of amusement. "Then sit down and ignore whatever the ship's safety system says." She fastened herself into the command chair. "Why?" He disabled the automatic navigation, cut the engines, and turned the shuttle directly toward the nearest enemy vessel. "Because," he said as the collision warning began screaming, "the safety system has never won a war." The shuttle accelerated directly toward the nearest enemy vessel. Vaelara's safety harness tightened across her chest as warning symbols covered the windshield in furious red layers. Distance collapsed. 800 meters, 500, 200. The hostile ship opened fire, but Adrian rolled the shuttle beneath the first volley, cut power to the port thrusters, and allowed the vessel to tumble sideways through the burning trail of plasma. Vaelara's stomach attempted to resign from her body. "This is your strategy?" she shouted. "At the moment. Do you have another?" "Several, but this one was nearby." At the last possible second, Adrian fired the diplomatic shuttle's decorative weapons into the enemy's forward sensor array. The weak pulse cannons could not damage the armored hull, but they blinded the targeting system for 3 seconds. Adrian used all 3. Their shuttle passed so close beneath the vessel that Vaelara saw rows of missile doors opening across its surface. The missiles launched, lost their lock, and struck a second attacker moving in from the opposite side. 2 ships collided in a bloom of white fire and spinning armor. Adrian guided the shuttle through the debris without slowing. Behind them, the remaining vessels broke formation. "You made them shoot one another," Vaelara said. "They seemed unfriendly." "You have fought those species before. Many species shoot the same when frightened. They were not frightened until you took control." Adrian glanced at the tactical screen. "Then they are learning." He entered a gravity stream flowing from the Helion passage and shut down every visible system. Darkness filled the cabin. Without engines or shield emissions, the shuttle became another piece of drifting wreckage. Enemy ships spread through the debris field, scanning for life. Vaelara lowered her voice. "Can they detect us?" "Yes." "That is not reassuring." "You asked a technical question." A scanner beam passed across the hull. Adrian activated the emergency refrigeration system, dropping the cabin temperature so quickly that frost formed along the controls. Vaelara's breath turned white. "Why is it freezing?" "Their sensors are searching for heat." "I am a noblewoman, not cargo. Today you can be both." The beam moved on. Minutes later, the enemy vessels abandoned the search and turned toward the diplomatic summit. Adrian restored power and followed at a distance. Vaelara looked at him differently now. He had not defeated them through strength. He had read their movements before they made them, as if the battle had already happened somewhere inside his mind. "You could have destroyed all 9 ships," she said. "Probably. Then why did you not?" "Because survivors report what they fear." Before she could ask what that meant, the orbital palace of Asterion appeared beyond the gravity towers. It was larger than several cities joined together, built around a captured miniature star whose golden light passed through crystal halls and artificial oceans. Hundreds of diplomatic ships surrounded it. Banners made of living light flowed across space, displaying the symbols of ancient houses and rival empires. Their arrival should have been elegant. Instead, the shuttle emerged from the debris field, scorched, dented, and missing one decorative wing. Docking officials stared through the observation windows as it limped into the noble berth. Vaelara stepped onto the platform with her dignity intact and her hair in open rebellion. Adrian followed, carrying his travel bag. "Say nothing," she warned. "I was going to compliment the landing." "You did not land. You crashed with paperwork." The summit opened inside a hall supported by transparent pillars containing slow-moving galaxies of artificial light. Alien rulers, ambassadors, war priests, merchant princes, and military commanders filled the chamber. Vaelara entered beneath the announcement of her titles while Adrian remained 3 steps behind, exactly as instructed. Yet heads turned toward him. A scaled general dropped his ceremonial cup. An insectoid admiral folded all 4 arms across his chest in an old gesture of surrender. Across the hall, a silver-haired human ambassador quietly left without finishing his sentence. Vaelara noticed everything. Adrian pretended not to. During the ceremonial greeting, a floating translator misinterpreted Vaelara's formal statement of peace as a proposal of marriage to an amphibian governor. The governor accepted before the machine corrected itself. Adrian leaned closer. "Congratulations. Speak again, and I will sell you. At my current price, that may disappoint you." For a brief moment, she nearly smiled. Then every light in the hall went black. The miniature star beneath the palace flickered. Security fields collapsed. From the balconies, servants, guards, and musicians drew hidden weapons in perfect unison. Hundreds of assassins turned toward Vaelara and Adrian. Panic shattered the ceremony. Nobles fled behind tables. Ambassadors screamed in 12 languages. Adrian placed his bag on the floor and calmly removed his coat. "Will dinner still be served?" he asked. Vaelara stared at the weapons surrounding them. "You are thinking about dinner?" "I fight badly when hungry." The first assassin fired. Adrian moved before the light left the barrel. Adrian seized Vaelara by the waist and pulled her behind a crystal banquet table as the first pulse struck the place where her head had been. The table exploded into glittering fragments, showering them with pieces of artificial diamond and one very offended dessert. "Was that necessary?" Vaelara demanded. "The dessert?" Adrian asked. "No. It died bravely." He rose before the second volley arrived, caught the wrist of a masked assassin, and redirected the weapon toward the balcony. 3 hidden shooters dropped as their own allies' plasma burst cut through the railing. Adrian then twisted the weapon free, struck the assassin with its grip, and sent him sliding across the polished floor into an ornamental fountain. The fountain announced in a pleasant mechanical voice that swimming was prohibited. "Useful," Adrian muttered. The assassins advanced from every entrance. Their armor, weapons, and biology belonged to different worlds, but they moved according to the same pattern. 2 forced the target forward. 3 closed the sides. A 4th waited above. Adrian saw the formation once and understood everything. He fired at a chandelier of suspended gravity crystals. The support field collapsed, and the crystals fell upward, tearing through the balcony and carrying the hidden attacker into the ceiling. Vaelara watched from behind the ruined table, unable to decide whether she was witnessing combat or a carefully rehearsed disaster. "Stay down," Adrian said. "I am not hiding." "Then you are kneeling with impressive confidence." She drew a jeweled pulse dagger from her sleeve. "I am a daughter of House Soren." "Excellent. House Soren can remain alive for another 5 minutes." He moved again. No motion was wasted. He never fought the attacker in front of him. He fought the one who would move next. A reptilian mercenary lunged with a plasma spear. Adrian stepped inside the blade, trapped the shaft beneath his arm, and used the weapon to trip 2 others. A mechanical assassin unfolded from the body of a ceremonial musician. Adrian kicked a fallen serving tray into its optical sensors, then pushed it into the miniature gravity well at the center of the hall. The machine folded into a sphere the size of a fruit. The palace announced that unauthorized compression was against safety regulations. "Your summit has many rules," Adrian said. "It has fewer guests now," Vaelara replied. For the first time, he smiled. The humor vanished when the assassins withdrew together. Silence replaced the chaos. Smoke drifted beneath the dark ceiling. Around the hall, wounded guards and terrified nobles began to rise. Then the floor trembled. A section of black stone opened near the imperial dais, revealing a descending passage that should not have existed beneath the palace. From below came a low mechanical pulse, older than the station, and powerful enough to distort the air. Adrian's expression hardened. "They were not trying to kill us here. They fired at my head." A distraction can still be enthusiastic. He grabbed his travel bag and led her toward the hidden passage. "Where are we going?" "To find out what they woke up." "You say that as though you already know." "I know what was buried beneath Asterion." Vaelara followed him into the dark before pride could remind her that noblewomen were not supposed to chase forgotten weapons through secret tunnels. The passage descended beyond the palace's visible structure, through layers of alloy untouched for centuries. Ancient symbols glowed along the walls as Adrian approached, recognizing his presence before Vaelara's diplomatic codes could even activate. Doors opened without command. Defense drones lowered their weapons. At the bottom, they entered a vault large enough to contain a warship. Rows of silent machines stood beneath sheets of frost. Some were shaped like coffins, others like armored giants. In the center rested a black command table covered in the crests of extinct empires. Vaelara touched one symbol and recoiled as a holographic battlefield filled the chamber. Stars burned. Fleets vanished. Entire moons became weapons. Above them appeared a single identification. Campaign 17. Authorized Commander, Adrian Cross. She turned slowly. You said the archives were unreliable. They are. This vault recognizes you. Machines are often less dishonest than governments. He approached the command table, and the frozen systems awakened one by one. Voices whispered in dead languages. Tactical maps spread across the floor. Vaelara saw 23 campaign markers and understood that every one of them represented a war the galaxy had been taught to forget. Why were these battles erased? She asked. Adrian remained silent for so long that even the machines seemed to wait. Because we did not defeat armies, he finally said. We stopped civilizations that had decided survival belonged only to them. And you commanded all of it? I commanded what remained. Before she could speak, an old food dispenser flickered to life beside him. Adrian pressed a button. It produced a cup of black liquid that smelled like burned metal. He tasted it and frowned. Centuries of technological progress, he said, and military coffee is still a war crime. Vaelara almost laughed, but a new image appeared above the table. Beyond Asterion, hundreds of dormant ships were awakening in deep space. Their hulls carried the same symbols as the extinct enemies in the archive. One by one, they turned toward the palace. Adrian set down the cup. They were waiting for confirmation that I was alive. Vaelara looked at the growing fleet. And now? He opened his travel bag. Inside, beneath 2 shirts and a repair kit, rested a black command insignia marked with 23 silver lines. Now, he said. They know. The black insignia activated the moment Adrian pressed it against his coat. 23 silver lines brightened one after another, and the buried vault responded as though an ancient heart had begun beating beneath Asterion. Tactical displays rose from the floor. Dormant communication arrays unfolded inside the walls. Across the palace, sealed military channels forced themselves open with a code no living officer had authority to refuse. Vaelara watched hundreds of faces appear above the command table. Admirals, generals, fleet marshals, and planetary defenders filled the holographic grid. Some wore ceremonial uniforms. Others appeared from damaged bridges already shaking under distant weapons fire. Every conversation stopped when they saw Adrian. A 4-armed admiral lowered all 4 fists to his chest. Commander Cross. The others followed. No debate. No demand for proof. No hesitation. Vaelara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the frozen vault. These were leaders who spent entire careers refusing orders from one another, yet the cheapest bodyguard in the employment registry had silenced them by standing still. Adrian looked across the assembled officers. Report. The word was quiet, but the galaxy answered. The dormant fleet had divided into 7 attack groups. 3 moved toward Asterion. 2 were targeting nearby civilian systems. Another had begun disabling gravity towers along the Helion passage. The final group remained beyond sensor range, hidden behind a curtain of artificial dark matter. They are repeating the Varkesh pattern, said an elderly human admiral. No, Adrian replied. They want us to think they are. A scaled commander leaned closer to his display. The formations are identical. The Varkesh never protected their rear. Silence followed. Adrian enlarged the tactical map. Their 7th group is not reserve support. It is carrying a dimensional anchor. Several officers reacted with visible fear. Vaelara knew the term only from forbidden academic texts. A dimensional anchor could tear a stable corridor through folded space, allowing an entire fleet to appear inside a defended system without crossing the distance between. How long? Adrian asked. 42 minutes, an officer answered. Then we have 30. Vaelara stepped closer. You have just misplaced 12 minutes. I am including the enemy's confidence. He began issuing orders. 3 fleets were told to retreat. 2 were ordered to power down their heaviest weapons. A planetary defense network was commanded to fire at empty space. Every instruction sounded wrong, almost absurd, yet none of the admirals objected. One young commander finally did. "With respect, sir, abandoning the eastern corridor will expose Asterion." "Yes." The commander blinked. "That is intentional?" "No, I often expose palaces accidentally." Vaelara crossed her arms. "You did crash my shuttle. That was controlled. It was missing a wing. It had another." The brief exchange traveled across every open military channel. Nervous laughter escaped from several bridges. The fear in the holographic faces loosened just enough for people to breathe again. Adrian pointed toward the empty eastern corridor. "They know I value civilian lives. They will expect me to defend everything. So we will give them something undefended and make them believe I have become careless." The trap formed slowly. Retreating fleets left behind clouds of sensor-reflective dust. Powered-down battleships hid inside the debris. Defense cannons fired into empty space, creating false heat signatures that resembled mass troop movements. Asterion's miniature star was dimmed until the palace appeared crippled. The enemy took the invitation. Hundreds of black vessels entered the eastern corridor in perfect formation. The hidden dimensional anchor appeared behind them, unfolding like a metallic flower around a sphere of darkness. Adrian waited. Vaelara watched the distance narrow. "Should we not attack?" "Not yet. They are almost within weapons range." "Still too comfortable." The enemy fleet accelerated. Adrian's eyes remained on the tactical map. He seemed less like a man commanding a battle than someone listening to a familiar piece of music and waiting for the wrong note. Then the rear ships changed direction. "There," he said. The supposed invasion fleet split apart, revealing thousands of unmanned war machines packed between the larger vessels. They had intended to flood Asterion's defenses while the dimensional anchor opened a path for the true fleet. Adrian raised one hand. Every gravity tower in the Helion passage reversed at once. Space bent. The empty corridor collapsed inward, dragging the unmanned machines into their own anchor field. The hidden battleships powered up and fired, not at the enemy vessels, but at the dark sphere between them. The dimensional anchor shattered. Folded space snapped back like a broken cable. Half the attacking fleet vanished into the corridor it had created. The rest emerged scattered across 3 star systems, isolated and surrounded by Allied forces already waiting for them. Cheers erupted through the military channels. Adrian did not celebrate. "The 7th group?" he asked. A sensor officer shook her head. "Gone." "No. Displaced." A warning appeared above the command table. One enemy vessel had not been pulled away. It was moving directly toward Asterion, shields collapsing, engines overloaded. Its reactor signature climbed beyond containment. Vaelara stared at the projection. "It is going to ram the palace." Adrian removed the insignia from his coat. "Why are you taking that off?" she asked. "Because admirals will try to stop me." He picked up his travel bag and headed toward the vault exit. Vaelara followed. "Stop you from doing what?" "Borrowing your damaged shuttle." "It has one wing." Adrian glanced back at her. "Then this flight should feel familiar." The damaged shuttle launched from Asterion with one wing, 2 functioning thrusters, and a navigation system that repeatedly recommended surrender. Adrian silenced the warning with the side of his hand while Vaelara strapped herself into the seat beside him. "You were supposed to remain in the palace," he said. "You were supposed to remain 3 steps in front of me. That was never in the contract. I am revising it." The enemy vessel filled the forward window, a black spear wrapped in burning plasma. Its reactor had entered terminal collapse. If it struck Asterion, the explosion would tear through the miniature star at the palace core and ignite every ship in orbit. Adrian examined the tactical display. "We cannot destroy it." Vaelara looked at the overloaded weapons panel. "Your decorative cannons finally disappoint you?" They have disappointed me consistently. I respect their discipline. He pushed the shuttle faster. The enemy ship transmitted a burst of ancient code. The vault systems translated it automatically, and a voice emerged through the cabin. Commander Cross, 23 worlds remember your mercy as humiliation. Adrian's expression remained still. The voice continued. You should have destroyed us when you had the chance. Vaelara turned toward him. Is that what happened? He did not answer immediately. The burning vessel grew larger ahead of them. At the end of every campaign, he said, I was ordered to erase the defeated civilizations, their fleets, their cities, their children. I refused. And the empires erased your name for that? They erased it because peace depended on pretending everyone had agreed. The voice returned. Your compassion preserved our hatred. Adrian opened a channel. No, it preserved your choice. There was silence on the other end. He guided the shuttle beneath the enemy vessel's broken armor, searching for an access point. Vaelara saw the plan before he explained it. You intend to board that ship. I intend to adjust its direction. With what? Polite conversation. You are carrying explosives. Persuasive conversation. Their shuttle struck the outer hull and locked against it. Adrian opened the hatch. Beyond it, fire raced through the enemy corridors while gravity failed in violent waves. Vaelara unfastened her harness. No, Adrian said. You are my employee. This is a poor time to discuss hierarchy. It is an excellent time. You have spent this entire journey deciding what risks I am permitted to take. I was hired to keep you alive. And I hired you because you were cheap. She met his eyes. I kept you because you were not. For once, Adrian had no joke. They entered the dying ship together. Inside, automated defenders crawled from the walls, but Vaelara used her noble access seal to overload their command frequencies, while Adrian cleared the path ahead. They reached the reactor chamber with less than 4 minutes remaining. At its center stood the assassin leader who had commanded the attack on Asterion, his armor cracked and his body sustained by flickering machinery. You spared my ancestors, he told Adrian. They taught us to fear your return. Adrian lowered his weapon. Then they taught you the wrong lesson. The alien raised a detonator. Vaelara fired first. Her pulse dagger struck the device, knocking it into the reactor pit. She looked at Adrian. I grew tired of people interrupting you. That was almost heroic. Almost. You damaged expensive equipment. The assassin leader laughed bitterly as the reactor alarms rose. You cannot save the palace and escape. Adrian reached the navigation core and entered a manual command sequence. I only need to do one of those things. Vaelara saw the truth in his face. No. Return to the shuttle. No. Vaelara. It was the first time he had spoken her name without title or humor. She stepped beside him and placed her hand on the controls. You won 23 wars alone in the history books. You will not win the 24th alone in reality. Together they redirected the failing vessel toward the dimensional scar left by the shattered anchor. Allied fleets opened fire around them, not at the ship, but at the torn fabric of space. The scar widened into a brilliant corridor. They ran. The shuttle detached seconds before the enemy vessel entered the rupture. Its reactor exploded beyond normal space, and the shockwave sealed the corridor behind it. A silent sphere of light expanded across the stars and vanished. When Vaelara opened her eyes, the shuttle was drifting above Asterion. Every military channel carried cheers. Weeks later, the sealed archives were released by unanimous vote. The galaxy learned who had commanded the 23 campaigns and why his name had been erased. Statues were proposed. Medals were prepared. 3 empires offered Adrian permanent command. He refused everything. At a restored banquet hall, Vaelara announced before nobles, soldiers, and diplomats that she had discovered the greatest commander in galactic history at the bottom of an employment registry. And I hired him, she said, because he was the cheapest option available. Laughter filled the hall. Adrian stood beside her in a formal coat he clearly disliked. You still owe me for the damaged travel bag. You destroyed my shuttle. It was already damaged. You damaged it first. Their new contract waited on the table between them. The salary was no longer insulting. The duties included diplomatic protection, strategic consultation, and a private coffee machine certified by 3 military engineers. Adrian signed it. Vaelara's long ears lifted with quiet satisfaction. So you are staying? He looked through the crystal walls at the peaceful fleets surrounding Asterion. For now. She smiled. Good. There are only 2 noble houses still threatening to poison me. Progress. And 1 marriage proposal from an amphibian governor. Adrian picked up his coffee. That sounds outside my duties. It is written in the revised contract. He read the final line, sighed, and signed again. For the first time in generations, the galaxy remembered the man who had won 23 wars. But Vaelara remembered something history had missed. He had not been feared because he could destroy civilizations. He had been feared because, even after everything, he still believed they could become better.